Hey everyone, in this video we are going to use the 3D modeler Asset Forge to create some of the core assets for an Endless Runner game. So there's really two purposes to this video. One, to show you some of the functionality of Asset Forge, how to create 3D models for a game, and two, to have a very light but non-technical discussion about level design, because when you're making these assets you really have to consider how they're going to be utilized, because the way that a endless runner works is you have a 3D model, so like a section of track, like Subway Surfers, something like that, and that 3D model gets tiled over and over and over again, which means one edge of the model has to be flush with the other edge because they get stacked sequentially. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to do that, how we're going to make that work as we design this model. So let's start by clicking on the drop down here, and let's go all the way down to Western. So what we're going to do, we're going to make a 3x3 tile, a 3x3 model that's going to be used as a tile. So we're going to click on this one, porch floor. We're going to place it, and now that it's placed, we're just going to duplicate this. So rather than having to come over here, click, and bring it over here, we're just going to duplicate this one. So Control D to duplicate, and then you can hold Shift to slide it along one axis, and then Control D to duplicate again, slide that over. And now what you can do is you can Shift click and grab all these. So click, Shift, click, hold Shift again, click, and now we can duplicate all three at once. So Control D, and then we hold Shift to slide those along that axis, and then rinse and repeat. Control D, Shift, slide along the axis. Okay, so why 3x3? So if you've ever played an Endless Runner, you know that there's 3 lanes typically. So each column will be one of 3 lanes. Now the other question is, okay, well, why 3 rows? That gets a little bit more technical, but bottom line is you don't want to ever create a sequence of tiles where there's no solution, because that's not fair. You always want the player to have an escape, whether it's a jump or a dodge or whatever. So what you need to do, my recommendation is that you only put obstacles along the middle here. So since this will be sequential to this. In other words, when this gets tiled, this will be here, okay? So by only putting obstacles in the middle, that means you'll always have 2 sequential tiles to give the player that much time to maneuver, to get, to avoid the next obstacle. But if you put obstacles here and here, you might come up with a combination that's a no-win situation, and that's not fair to the player. So just a little light design discussion is that I would recommend only put in obstacles along the middle. That way there's always 2 rows for them to maneuver and to recover and to get to where they need to for the next obstacle. Okay, so let's actually create a material now. So if we click on this icon, so far that's the only material that's being used, wood. We're actually going to make this darker. We're going to make this more like a ground color, because the rails that we're going to put on this also use the wood texture, or at least one very close to it. And by the way, I'll probably use texture and material interchangeably. So if you hear me say texture, I just mean material. So material, new material, there it is. It appears. You can do a few things. You can choose a color, which we will. You can choose an image. We're not going to do that for this. I'm going to really use kind of an untextured game when I put this in, but you certainly can choose textures from here. It's just a picture. Like say you chose like this brick. You could choose a brick color, a brick pattern. Not going to do it for this one. And then this is more of a calculation. So we'll just stick with a color for this. So let's get to the orange range, because I think we can find like a brownish, reddish, gray, maybe not reddish, but brownish orange. And so we'll click there. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to take this material, it's already selected, and I'm just going to click. If I make any changes to that material, they'll automatically change. So you don't have to select it again. So once you've clicked on it, that's it. You've changed it. So watch what happens when I change this. It automatically changes again. So we'll just click on all these. It's a little bit greenish for my liking. At least it looks a little bit greenish to me. So let's bring it down to here. That's good. Kind of like a grayish, brownish. That's good. Because like I said, I just want to differentiate from the rails, and you'll see in a few seconds when we apply the rails. Okay, so those are going to be our 3 lanes. So now we're already in the western section. We're going to click on this one here, tracks. We're going to need to rotate them. I mean, I suppose the 3x3 could be this way. It's just that I know what the default alignment is in Unity, so it saves you a little bit of rotation. You can do whatever you want, though. So we're going to rotate this. By default, rotation is 15 degrees. We're going to change that to 90. And even though this looks like it's grayed out, it's just a dark gray and a black, but it is active. So we're going to bump the rotation up to 90. This is the rotation tool, and you can choose which axis it rotates on, all 3. So X, Y, or Z. So it's currently on Y. So we just rotate once, and we slide this over. To rotate the camera, that's hold right and then move the mouse. You can see the vertical arrows. Just move that up a little bit. The middle here moves it along the X and Z axis. So depending on the orientation, X, Z, and then Y is up and down, depending on which way I've rotated. But you get the idea, though. The X and the Z are the horizontals, and that the Y is the vertical. So now what we're going to do is we want this to be centered on this. So how do we know it's centered? Simple. What we're going to do is with an object selected, you can then click on this tool, and you can see its position. So it's 1, 0, 1. So if we click on the rail, you can see it's not. So 1, 1, and now it's centered. Now the only thing is we don't want to change this to 0 because remember, it has to be slightly above it. We want this to be slightly higher. As you can see, it's nice and flush against it now. And now it's just rinse and repeat. So with it selected, Control D, you can see one block duplicated. I'm going to hold Shift to constrain this to just one axis. So there's 2 different reasons why you hold Shift. If you're clicking on objects, okay, you're holding Shift to select multiple. If you've already selected an object and you're holding Shift, that's just to constrain it to one axis. And so we'll just slide that up. And then you can duplicate that again and slide that up. And if you want, you can double check the position, but it should be fine. So like if you click on this rail, see it's 1, -1, 1, -1, so you know they're centered. And again, rinse and repeat. So this time I'm holding Shift to select multiple, Control D, slide it over, eyeballing it, but I'll double check, and then Control D, slide that over. So again, we'll click on this one. So this is 0, -1, 0, -1. Again, the 0.1 is fine because it's elevated. And since these are lined up, these should all be fine. But again, you certainly can check them individually. -1, -1, actually want to click that. -1, -1, and 0.1. So everything's all lined up. Okay. Now here's the thing. Even if your camera is above the tracks and looking down, you're going to have some space over here. So you're going to want to add some more, if nothing else, filler so people don't just see like a void, okay? So first we're going to put a fence in place. That way players don't think they're going to fall over. Although, who knows, maybe with your Endless Runner game, you want people to be able to fall off the rail. That's your choice. But we're going to put up a fence to begin with. So let's click on the block. We'll click on the category, and this should be a fence category. And I'll mention that right now that everything here seems to be mostly inorganic. They're objects. So ground, fences, vehicles, you don't see like birds and things like that. Maybe they'll eventually add packs like that. But for the most part, these are really designed to like snap together. So I think that's the reason why you don't see animals. So if they ever did something like that, my guess is they'd probably actually do components, like it would be like a wing, a tail, that kind of thing. So we'll just take a fence. We'll put it here, and then we rotate it again. We'll just rotate it. And as you can see, it's actually over 1, over a little bit, rather. It's not on the same tile. So if we keep rotating this, and then we move it over, you can see now it lines up nice and neat. Now what we can do is we can raise this up. And again, you can see it's nice and flush. So Control D, hold Shift to slide that down. Control D, slide this down. And again, a brief discussion about design. So as we said, this entire 3D model is going to be treated like a tile. So this whole thing will be displayed here again and again and again. So see how this is a double and this is a double? This is a single, this is a single. That's absolutely perfect. This lined up against this will make a double. Same thing for the track. See how this is only like half where all these are wider? That half will match with this half and make a full. So again, you're tiling these things. So we'll click on the fence, Shift, click, and then we'll Control D to duplicate all three, hold Shift to slide that over on one axis, and then remember how I had to rotate these? I have to rotate them again, because if I go like this, you can see how it's overhanging again. And you can just rotate the whole thing, slide it over. Actually, I think it's because I had them all selected that it didn't rotate right, that it didn't really rotate them individually. So sorry about that. But mistakes can be important too to learn from. So in that case, you had to rotate them individually, because if you rotated them completely, if you rotated them all at the same time, you really weren't changing what direction they were facing. So, all right, so now we have really close to where we want to be. We're going to create some like grass over here, so it's just going to be like green, and then we'll probably just put a slope to finish off and cover up the distance. So what we'll do, we will go back to Western, click, place that there, make sure it's lined up. One time I did this and it was like off by a little bit like that, and I didn't notice it until I imported it. Okay, so we're going to create another custom material. So again, make sure you don't change your pre-existing one, because anything that's using that would automatically change. So we'll go to Material, New Material. And what happened is it copied the color that's selected, because I was expecting it to duplicate as white. So like if you don't have anything selected, it would create a white one, because we had a selected one, it duplicated it. So let's make this like a green grass. And we click here. That's a little bright. And again, I don't have to keep clicking on it, because what's happened is, again, it's using this material. I changed the material, and therefore it will change automatically. Okay, so I think that's good. Let's Control D, Shift, slide over. Control D, Shift, slide over. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but we do learn through repetition. Click, hold Shift, click, still holding Shift, click. Control D, hold Shift, slide up. And then Control D, slide up. There we go. So that's nice and flush there as well. And so now we can copy this whole thing. Control D, and now we slide this over. There we go. Well, like I said, even with the camera pointing down at this, you're still going to be able to see off in the distance. So the grass will take care of some of the things, but you're still going to need like a slope for like the upper corners. So, and you could put a building or something, but we're just going to put let's see, let's go to primitives. And we'll just choose like a slope. We'll put that there. We'll rotate it. We're going to scale this out because obviously this isn't very high, so this won't cover up much in the distance. So we're going to take one of these dots, just do that, and then kind of do that. And we really don't want a gap there. So we'll just move that over once. So again, everything will be flush when this gets turned into a single model. And then you can either stretch this out or you can just duplicate it. We'll do Control D, slide it over just for consistency's sake. Control D and slide it over. Also, when you're doing this, you might maybe want to put, maybe you're making a pattern, and by doing this, it'll make it easier for each slope to have different patterns on it. Because if you have just one, you stretch it out, you're kind of committed to that across all three. So click Shift, Control D, slide that over, and then we rotate. And slide that over one. And it looks like we have that little bit of a gap, so let's slide it that way. Oops. Wasn't holding shift, so it moved along multiple axes. Oh, you know what? See, now that I'm above, I can see this one isn't in the right position. Let's undo that. There we go. It's going to rotate around. And again, rotating around like that is holding down the right mouse button and moving the mouse. Panning is holding down the scroll wheel and then moving the mouse, and then zooming in out is, unsurprisingly, the scroll wheel. And then you can just apply something to this, like maybe we would do, let's come here. Actually, sorry, new material. So see how none of these were selected, so it defaulted to white. And this time we will choose an image. How does that look? The thing is, these sides don't matter. You won't see the side. I was saying I was going to do untextured, but that might be okay. Let's go with that. Okay. So that should about do it. You can add things here, but again, since this whole thing is going to be treated like a tile, then that means if you put a crate here, the crate will be in exactly the same place every time, and it gets kind of obvious. So that kind of stuff you'll probably instantiate in real time while the game is running, as well as the actual obstacles, because clearly there's no obstacles here. Those two would be done in real time. So I think that should do it. I hope this has been helpful, and this will be the exact model that I will use in the next video, which will be the actual making of the 3D Endless Runner. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you've enjoyed this, and that please enjoy the rest of your day.